You've probably heard the story. Marco Polo, traveling through China, discovers a strange frozen dessert and brings the recipe back to Italy, where it becomes gelato. Or maybe you heard the other one. A French queen, Catherine de' Medici, arrives from Italy in the 1500s with her own personal ice cream chefs and introduces the dessert to French royalty. Here's the problem. Neither of those stories is true. Marco Polo's own journals never mention a frozen dessert, not once. And Catherine de' Medici married into the French royal family in 1533, more than 150 years before the first known recipe for anything resembling modern ice cream was ever written down. Both stories were invented, not in the era they claim to describe, but centuries later as marketing. So if the stories we've all heard are fake, who actually did it? The real answer isn't one person. It isn't one country. It's a 2,500-year relay race between people who never met, never spoke the same language, and had no idea they were working on the same problem. This is that story. Here's the strange thing about ice cream. It doesn't have an inventor. It has dozens of them. An engineer in the Persian desert, a poet in a Chinese royal court, a chemist in Naples playing with strange white powders, and a woman in New Hampshire whose invention is sitting, right now, in more freezers than she ever could have imagined, and who vanished from the history books almost the moment she made it. None of them set out to invent ice cream. Each of them was just trying to solve a much smaller problem. It just so happens that when you stack all of those small solutions on top of each other, across 25 centuries, you get a scoop. To understand how that happened, we have to go back to a place that seems like the least likely birthplace for a frozen dessert imaginable, the middle of a desert. Persia, around 550 BCE, in a landscape where summer temperatures could soar past 40 degrees Celsius. Persian engineers built something remarkable, massive dome structures called yakshals. Using nothing but clever architecture, evaporative cooling, radiative heat loss, and underground insulation, these structures could store ice through the hottest months of the year. Some could even manufacture ice from scratch, overnight, in the desert. With a reliable ice supply, Persian cooks began sweetening it, combining shaved ice with fruit syrups and honey to create sherbet and a rosewater noodle dessert called faluda that's still eaten today. This is piece number one: reliable, storable cold. Now travel east to Tang Dynasty China, sometime between the years 618 and 907. In the royal kitchens, chefs are doing something nobody in Persia was doing yet: mixing dairy into a frozen dessert. They heat buffalo, goat, or cow milk with flour, add a touch of camphor for flavor, and freeze the mixture in metal tubes lowered into pools of ice. The result was called sushan, and one Tang court poet described its texture as somewhere between solid and liquid, melting the instant it touched the mouth. This is piece number two: frozen dairy. And in Rome, around the same era as the earliest Persian ice houses, wealthy elites are sending teams up into the Alps to haul snow back down to the city, packing it in underground cellars, then mixing it with wine, honey, and fruit at lavish banquets. It's not dairy. It's closer to what we now call a granita, but it proves something important. Frozen dessert isn't a fluke. It's something multiple, unconnected civilizations are independently drawn toward whenever they have the means. So by roughly the year 900, humanity has cold storage. It has frozen dairy. It has sweetened flavored ice. Every ingredient of ice cream already exists somewhere in the world. And yet, nobody has ice cream. Not the version we'd recognize today. Something is still missing. And the missing piece won't come from a chef at all. Naples, 1558. A scholar named Giambattista della Porta is experimenting with a substance called saltpeter, what we now know as potassium nitrate. He discovers something that will change everything. Mix saltpeter with ice, and you can drive the temperature of a liquid down far below what ice alone could ever achieve. Cold enough, in fact, to freeze cream itself on demand without a mountain or a desert ice house anywhere nearby. It takes about 60 years for cooks to realize something even better. Ordinary table salt does almost the same job, and it's far cheaper and easier to find than saltpeter. By the 1620s, this salt and ice technique spreads through Italian kitchens, and the first true sorbets, frozen sherbets, start to appear. This is the missing piece. Not a recipe, a method. And once that method exists, something remarkable happens. Two countries, with no evidence either copied the other, arrive at milk-based ice cream within years of each other. In Italy, a chef named Alberto Latini, cooking for a Roman cardinal, creates what he calls a milk sorbet: milk, sugar, water, and candied fruit, frozen using the new salt ice method. It's the ancestor gelato. And in France, in 1692, a household manager named Nicolas Audigier publishes a recipe at Versailles for cream frozen with sugar and orange flower water, complete with instructions for stirring and scraping the mixture as it freezes to keep it smooth. Two countries, two chefs, no connection between them that historians have ever found. Just the same breakthrough, discovered independently, because the physics had finally caught up to the ambition. Modern ice cream exists now. The recipe is solved. So why does it take another 150 years before you or I could ever taste it? Because for the next century and a half, ice cream isn't a dessert. It's a statement. King Charles II serves it at an English feast in 1671. It appears again at a royal banquet in 1688. It graces the table of Maryland's colonial governor, Thomas Bladen, in 1744, the first documented ice cream in America. George Washington later buys what records call a cream machine for ice. Thomas Jefferson writes down a vanilla ice cream recipe while serving in Paris in the 1780s. Notice who all of these people have in common: kings, governors, founding fathers. Because to eat ice cream in this era, you needed two things almost nobody had: a steady supply of ice and a household staff to labor over churning it by hand, batch by batch, in a bucket of salt and ice. Ice cream, for 150 years, belongs to the people who already have everything. Something is about to break that wide open, and it won't come from a king, a chef, or a founding father at all. The first crack comes from an unlikely source: a Boston businessman named Frederick Tudor. Starting in 1806, Tudor does something that sounds almost absurd. He starts shipping frozen New England pond ice by the ton to the Caribbean. His first shipment mostly melts before it even arrives. But he doesn't stop. He develops better insulation, faster harvesting tools, bigger ships. By the 1840s, his company is exporting roughly 75,000 tons of ice a year, not just to the Caribbean, but to India, China, and across Europe. For the first time in human history, ice becomes something an ordinary household might actually be able to afford. But affordable ice alone isn't enough. You still need a way to turn that ice into ice cream without a servant standing over a bucket for an hour. That problem gets solved in 1843 by a woman named Nancy Johnson. Johnson patents a hand crank freezer, a wooden bucket packed with salt and ice, with a metal canister inside it, turned by a simple hand crank that scrapes the freezing cream from the sides as it churns. It's elegant. It's effective. And the basic design principle, churn, scrape, freeze, is still the exact mechanism used inside ice cream makers sold today, more than 180 years later. And then, almost as soon as she patents it, Nancy Johnson disappears from the story. There's no fortune built in her name, no factory, no brand. While the men who commercialized ice cream in the following decades became wealthy industrialists remembered in history books, the woman whose invention actually made mass production possible simply vanishes from the record. Her machine outlived her name. With affordable ice, a working home freezer, and a growing middle class hungry for it, ice cream stops being a royal privilege almost overnight. In 1851, a Baltimore dairyman named Jacob Fussell, trying to find a use for his surplus cream, opens what's considered the first commercial ice cream factory. It's no longer a luxury made one bucket at a time. It's a product. Then comes the piece almost everyone already thinks they know, the cone. Most people have heard it was invented at the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis, when a waffle vendor supposedly ran out of cups and improvised. It's a great story, and it's not quite the full one. An Italian immigrant named Italo Marcini had already patented a cone-making mold the year before, in 1903. Historians still argue about exactly who deserves credit. Several vendors at that fair all claim to have invented it independently. What we know for certain is that the cone didn't spring fully formed out of a single afternoon of improvisation. It was already being built one patent at a time. By 1938, a father and son team named JF and Alex McCullough developed a soft-serve formula, first sold at a small Illinois ice cream shop. Mechanical refrigeration replaces the ice trade almost entirely by the mid-1900s. And what started as an emperor's privilege becomes, within a single century, something you can buy from a truck on a street corner for pocket change. But here's what's strange. The more ordinary ice cream becomes, the less anyone thinks about what's actually happening inside the bowl. Because ice cream, even today, isn't simple. It's an engineered structure. It's roughly a third tiny ice crystals, so small, at 10 to 20 microns, that your tongue reads them as smooth instead of icy. It's close to half whipped in air, which is why a container of ice cream weighs less than you'd expect for its size. Fat globules form a delicate network that traps that air in place. And stabilizers, gums extracted from plants, quietly prevent ice crystals from growing larger every time a freezer door opens and the temperature shifts. Melt-resistant, airlight, precisely engineered to feel effortless in your mouth. What feels like the simplest treat in the world is, underneath, one of the most carefully balanced things you'll ever eat. So the next time someone tells you Marco Polo invented ice cream, you'll know better. Because the real story is stranger and better than that. It's a Persian engineer solving a desert cooling problem 2,500 years ago. A Tang court poet describing a dessert that melted like nothing he'd tasted before. A Naples scholar mixing salt into ice just to see what would happen. And a woman in New Hampshire whose invention is still turning quietly inside freezers all over the world, even though her name rarely comes with it. None of them knew they were building the same thing. None of them ever met. But the next time a spoon touches a bowl of ice cream, it's touching all of them at once. Every meal carries more than flavor. It carries the footsteps of countless generations, shaped by curiosity, necessity, and the people who came before us. The story we've uncovered today is just one chapter in a much larger history still waiting to be explored. If this journey changed the way you see what's on your plate, consider leaving a like so more curious minds can discover it. Share this story with someone who loves food, history, or both, and let us know in the comments what surprised you most, or which culinary mystery you'd like us to uncover next. And if you'd like to keep exploring the remarkable stories hidden inside everyday meals, we'd be honored to have you join us by subscribing to Culinary Lore. Because every ingredient has a past, every recipe has a journey, and every meal has a story. Until our next journey through the world's table, keep wondering what's behind the next bite. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next story.